Hopefully Michael's NGO redeems all of my trashing Giacchino. It's like soundtrack, of course, doesn't hate you, Mike.
It's just Robert.
You can come on.
Just Robert. Robert's got an internet beef with Michael Giacchino.
Michael, you had filmed this week, and I saw that you actually reviewed one that I considered writing an NGO about because I actually really liked that soundtrack. Do you want to tell us about that one?
Yes, the Man From U.N.C.L.E. I started it, and at first I thought, like, that type of music is not something I listen to very frequently. Mm-hmm. And so my first thought was like, oh, it's going to be like, you know, kind of Ocean's 11 vibe or whatever. It's all right. It's cool. It has a good soundtrack as well, but it's not something I really listen to. But I actually was really... It felt very like classic, but with a modern take on classic spy music, which felt very refreshing to me, and I think was part of the appeal for me, and part of why I liked it so much.
Did you see the movie?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
just once. So
it kind of did have that feel because it's set in the '60s, obviously, but it's Guy Ritchie who has that kind of very stylized style to his movies. Right. I feel like, so I kind of guess that kind of reflected that. Robert, have you seen that movie or heard much of the soundtrack of that one?
So I've seen the movie. I have not heard the soundtrack, though I do definitely want to listen to it. Your digging into the instruments was pretty fascinating, Michael.
Yeah, so I found, I was trying to figure out what one of the sounds was. I just Googled like instruments, Man From U.N.C.L.E, and I found this article talking about how he used some both unconventional instruments, but also some instruments you would not expect. I think he uses the organ in there somewhere. It's like layered in there. And then also a type of dulcimer and what was it? Hungarian milk churns.
Interesting.
So that was an actual milk churn for making butter versus an instrument?
I think so, yeah. And I guess it's an instrument now.
That's super cool when composers do that.
Yeah, and that was Daniel Pemberman, if I'm not mistaken. He did Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, did he really?
Which is very different style.
Yeah.
He also did the new King Arthur with Charlie Hunnam. Is that his name?
Yeah, that was also a Guy Ritchie movie as well. So I wonder if he must work with them.
That would make sense.
A couple times, I don't know.
I wonder if he's as quirky as Guy Ritchie. I mean, he found a Hungarian milk churn for an instrument.
Got to be a little quirky for that, I suppose. Yeah, I'm actually looking. Oh, interestingly, he did Ocean's 8, Michael. You were talking about Ocean's 11.
No way.
So I guess I don't know how that soundtrack is, but okay. So yeah, I'm looking at his stuff now. He did Enola Holmes, which kind of had from what I remember, kind of a charming soundtrack.
Yeah, I do remember liking the King Arthur soundtrack as well. So I'll have to give The Man From U.N.C.L.E. a listen. I feel like we're doing an awful lot of Bond-esque spy movies lately, though. Like, how close, Michael, is this soundtrack to The Incredibles that we did last week?
Ooh.
In sound, I'm not saying in quality, unless Daniel Pemberton's listening to this.
I'd have to listen to them back to back. That would be a really interesting experiment. It's funny, another thing that he did with the soundtrack is he recorded on old tape machines.
Wait. Are you serious? For Man From U.N.C.L.E?
Yeah.
That's what Michael Giacchino did for The Incredibles.
No way.
Yeah, because they wanted that old sound, and Brad Bird is very particular about his stuff and the way he wanted it. And so, yeah, it was like the spy. I don't know. That's really interesting. I didn't know that was a common thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That must just be a best practice when you want an old spy sound, or they're like Tesla and Edison and our mortal enemies trying to outdo each other with spy music.
Yeah,
or just great minds think alike.
I think I know what side Robert would go on if it was Giacchino versus anyone.
Not necessarily, actually. I think the Incredibles soundtrack probably stands a fighting chance here.
Oh boy.
I feel like there is a particular sound or motif that you hear in, maybe it's just because I've watched the Incredibles movies, that's the not prototypical, that's the wrong word, but the typical spy like motif. It's like a bum bum ba bum bum, and you're using a brass. Is that the Incredibles?
Yeah, wait, I think so. Yeah.
Or is it the Incredibles, James Bond, and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, it is very, you can definitely
or maybe that's James Bond, isn't it? Bum 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 bum.
No, now you're starting to like get smart.
Right. It's like,
which is also
those notes. If you hear that, you go, "Oh, this is a 60s spy movie."
I mean,
but you know what's interesting? Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that you just described that very similar kind of sound, But each one we were able to pick out, oh, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, that's The Incredibles. And then you did the one, oh, that's Get Smart. They're very similar sounds and feels, but they're each iconic enough to point out what film franchise or show they're from.
I mean, you've got like Henry. I know Giacchino was inspired by Henry Mancini, and obviously John Barry, who did a lot of the Bond films when he did Incredibles. So I'm sure, like, Mancini has a lot of very similar sounding music as well. Like he kind of pioneered a lot of that sound. So, I mean, if it comes from a few specific composers and then gets associated, obviously, with spy films, I'm sure they kind of try to reuse similar motifs, I guess.
But they're all coming out of James Bond, aren't they?
I would imagine so. I mean, John Barry was, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know who did first, because Mancini's been around, but he did like Peter Gunn as well, which is another one that's kind of got.
Oh yeah, Peter Gunn
and Pink Panther, of course.
Okay. Yep.
I did James Horner for my composer spotlight, and I know he's actually had a motif, or like I think they called it the danger theme, that is present in a lot of his soundtracks when like associated with the villains.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I do remember.
Can you hum it?
I can't remember it, to be honest, but there is something I've heard in several James Horner soundtracks, specifically I think most prominent in The Mask of Zorro, which I believe he did.
He did.
Yeah, and it's I don't know how to describe it. It's a wind instrument, I believe, but I've definitely heard that in other soundtracks as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard a couple of I love James Horner. Mm-hmm. Rest his soul.
Yeah.
But there is a very similar sound in Titanic and Avatar that I just love, and it's never a main theme. It's actually also in Balto, which he did.
Oh, wow.
Balto.
Yeah, it's a great soundtrack. But it's the da na 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 na.
Oh my god, that's a throwback.
Yeah, so you hear it multiple. Like, it's always underneath something else. It rarely ever comes to the forefront, but anytime it starts to, I'm always excited. We can probably find the actual piece. I believe it's in Death of Titanic, which I put into our epic soundtrack on Spotify this week.
You had an epic playtime on that one, too. I mean, how was it? Almost 4 hours, I think you got it, too?
Yeah, there's so much good epic music out there. I was considering, and not to derail the conversation, I was considering whether or not Samwise the Brave belonged on there. Just because it's like, for me, there's a lot of crossover between like gorgeous and epic.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm wondering if what we mean by epic is we want more like heart pounding, or do we want it to be, because epic can be epic emotion for me as well, and Samwise the Brave certainly carries that.
Yeah,
I agree 100%. In fact, I would argue that something is more epic for me if it has emotion to it, or some sort of emotional build, and even more so if I have the emotional context of a scene or whatever with it.
It certainly needs the emotion, otherwise it's just an action piece, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, like, Vogelim Kafig made it.
Nice. That's a good one.
Yeah, so softer, beautiful, but also has that build underneath the themes that kind of makes it epic.
Yep. And what's interesting is, and that track is a great example, where the theme builds to is almost like epic and tragic in a way, but the track opens up from a more happy place, And I think that's some of the most, like, and if you think about movie scenes or whatever, some of the most tragic scenes are ones where you've seen a character happy before.
Which one are we talking about?
Vogelim Kafig. It's from Attack on Titan.
Oh, well, that makes sense why I haven't heard that.
Have you not heard the music for Attack on Titan? It's incredible.
I've heard some of the music, and I actually used to listen to it while I worked, but it was kind of a compilation, so I don't know. And
Samuel Kim's compilations are really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually will often listen to that over the main soundtrack, because the main soundtrack's pretty long.
Yeah.
But
I don't know which version you were listening to, if you were listening to his or the actual piece from the soundtrack. But from the soundtrack, it opens up with a more uplifting, sort of happier vocal theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the real one. The official one.
Yes. Well, I know you did an epic playlist this week, Robert, but you also did a game that you could say is an epic game. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
In my life, it's an epic game. That's yeah, Age of Empires 3. After bailing out on Sea of Thieves.
Yes. You jumped the plank on that one.
I sure did.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I really was excited for Sea of Thieves. The theme was good, and then like the next 2 tracks were these Disneyfied, really stupid sea shanties, and I was like, I can't do this to myself this week.
I believe I recommended that one, and I forgot how many sea shanties are in that, because I do remember liking the calmer stuff, but it had been a while since I'd listened to it, and I apologize for that.
I probably should have. Well, maybe you can go ahead and do the quick take or something, or I can go back and listen again sometime and just get through. Like, be like, this is a 2.5 because all of the sea shanties suck and everything else is great. So, and it's half sucky sea.
You could probably find a top 3 out of there, though.
I probably could. I have heard Ambient Worlds does some Sea of Thieves movies on YouTube, and I think they're pretty good. Anyhow, Age of Empires 3, always, was a big fan of the music, playing it. So many throwbacks as motifs come on, and I'm, like my body starts getting like fast twitch in my fingers because it's like, oh, you gotta like move your men quick with this music. Very much a physiological response to it for me, but was also just surprised at how layered and well crafted and beautiful the soundtrack was in its own way. It's brassy, kind of like the older like classical film scores, but without ever really being overpowering, which I imagine is well done because you're playing a 2 to 3 hour game. They want you to be relaxed and enjoy your experience, and I think Age of Empires 3 definitely accomplished that, maybe even more so than the other 2, though I'll probably be reamed for that on social media.
Oh boy. Yeah, I saw that you said in your review like it's from like 2005, right?
Yeah, I forgot it's that old, which game scores were not a big thing back then.
There's an old Spider-Man 2 game I used to play, and I'll listen to the rip on YouTube, not because it's great music necessarily, but just it's nostalgic. Because it brings me like, oh yeah, this is when I was fighting Rhino. But yeah, that was probably around the same time, or maybe a little bit before, and it's nothing like crazy. I don't know. They've definitely improved over the years.
The music was kind of getting onto the cusp of video game music getting better, I think. Because Jesper Kid, who we did a composer spotlight for last week, was just getting his start around that time with Assassin's Creed as well. Which I do feel like the Assassin's Creed theme was one of the first, somebody I'm sure can point me to one that was before it, themes that most people that had any association with games or YouTube started to recognize, because YouTube stars started covering it, whether they did violin like Lindsey Sterling and Taylor Davis, or whatever else they do with covers. It's a good violin cover for sure. Piano ones, I would imagine the piano guys have a cover of it.
I
would not be surprised.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they do, or maybe 2 cellos. I may be sounding like an idiot here, but does Halo predate Assassin's Creed?
It does.
Pretty iconic main theme, but I couldn't tell you the rest of the soundtrack, to be honest. I only know the theme.
Yeah, I have not listened to the whole soundtrack, so we're going to have to put that on our list. But yeah, I mean, Halo, you want to talk about iconic and groundbreaking in so many ways.
It's quite a few good times playing Halo.
There's quite a few dying all the time in that game. For me.
Same.
I was not terrible. Good at that game.
I was only good if you gave me a gravity hammer and I managed to catch somebody unawares running around the corner.
I wanted to bring up something interesting I learned when researching James Horner this week.
Please do.
One of the things I watched was a TED Talk he did, and he was just talking about, which I haven't heard a lot of composers talk about this, but he was talking about a little bit of the difference between like creating like different kind of art disciplines like writing or painting and film composition, is that you can't go back. He'll like finish a score and it's done and be like, oh wait, actually I thought of this better version of, I could go back and tweak that theme, but you can't do it. And he said the other thing is it doesn't really belong to him anymore. He doesn't have the rights necessarily, and it's part of this bigger project, and a lot of times the directors will have different ideas. He'll like send this theme off that's like may sound great to him, but the director will be thinking of something different. Like it kind of stunts your creativity a little bit because it puts it in a box. And I thought that was really interesting because I haven't really heard anyone else say that.
You know, It's interesting that you bring that up. Occasionally, you'll have these directors and composers who work really well together, and I think Nolan and Zimmer are one example. And also, going to this week's Never Gets Old, I discovered that it's the same with Matt Reeves and Michael Giacchino. They had worked on some projects before the Batman, which is what I reviewed this week. And on this one, Giacchino actually composed the theme like before they even started filming, and he said in an interview that he felt like he had total freedom with this theme because first of all, Matt Reeves they have a good working relationship, and also Batman as he saw it, there's so many different takes on Batman, so many different comic issues that have different takes and whatnot since it was the character was first created, and so he kind of did a take on the score just from the script, and in fact he recorded a suite that is basically the Batman, the track entitled "The Batman," and that was the one that was released early before the film came out, and they actually had that like in pre-production, and so Matt Reeves would put it on when he was on like meetings with the executives at Warner Bros. To present like costume ideas and stuff like that. He would play this track, which is rare. They rarely have a theme composed that early on, and I think part of it was a function of the pandemic, and so they had more time.
Sure, and I'm sure you got that working relationship with the director.
Absolutely.
James Horner said that he liked working with Mel Gibson a lot. I guess with Braveheart, he gave him a lot of freedom.
He would have worked with Mel Gibson on Braveheart, and what else?
Apocalypto I saw was on his. I think it was something.
That's James Horner also.
I believe so. Yeah.
And Mel Gibson gave him pretty free reign.
That's what he said about Braveheart.
Very cool. I mean, he did an incredible job with Braveheart. So, Stephen, you had speaking of the British Isles, a pretty interesting TV soundtrack this week.
Yes, it's the Essex Serpent. And I'd never heard of this show before. I saw it pop up, and I saw that the soundtrack was released. And I was like, and I'll give that a listen. It sounded intriguing. There's not a lot of variation going on in that soundtrack. From the kind of description I read about the show, it seems to be kind of a mystery sort of thing. So it's a lot of eerie, foreboding stuff. There are a couple of tracks I really liked that were a little bit softer that still worked in that kind of unsettling part. So it'd definitely be a really good one for writing, I'd say. Wouldn't be one I would just kind of listen to in the background unless you're going to be looking over your shoulder half the time. But
so if you're going to do another adaptation of Sherlock Holmes, you might listen to
I did think of that. I was like, Hound of the Baskervilles, maybe? You could probably pretty great with like I just need the fog and all that stuff. That'd be great.
Nice.
It's got that eerie kind of something unknown is out there. That was the kind of vibe I was getting from it. So not a bad soundtrack. I gave it a 3.25 because it is one that I'm probably not going to revisit, but I think it would probably work well for the show.
Yeah.
It was an interesting listen for sure.
3.25 sounds so low, but that's like way above the middling 2.5.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't want this to sound like I'm tearing it apart because I'm not, but it's not up there with my 4s.
I do the same thing with Beer on Untapped.
There is one thing I would really interesting about the Batman score, and I noticed this I watched the movie twice, and the second time in theaters. The second time I was watching it, it dawned on me in the film. I don't remember the context, but at some point, Franz Schubert's Ave Maria, that hymn was playing or something.
Yes.
Oh, of course.
And so it dawned on me. I was like, oh my gosh, the Riddler's theme is that hymn, slowed down with the eerie vocals. That's Ave Maria.
What do you think he's saying by putting a church song on the Riddler?
Wasn't he in some orphanage or something?
Yes, that's what it was. Yes.
I'm going to be honest, though. I don't even think of Ave Maria as a church song anymore because they use it so many times in, like, Hitman type movies.
Really? Oh.
I just feel like I hear death scene is when I hear Ave. And it's a beautiful song. It's interesting, like, Inception, I know, did a similar thing with the bomb, bomb, bomb. But that theme is the... Of course, I'm blanking on the name of the song that they used to...
it's the French song, yes.
Yeah, the French song is slowed down.
Slowed way down. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Michael, I know I didn't realize you liked the Batman soundtrack as much to make it an NGO.
Yeah, I've listened to it enough to make up for how recent it came out.
That's fair.
Hopefully Michael's NGO redeems all of my... trashing Giacchino. It's like soundtrack scores doesn't hate you, Mike.
It's just Robert.
You can come on. I don't hate you either. I just think that your music is crap.
Oh
lately.
man.
Robert's got an internet beef with Michael Giacchino.
I have to say though, I love Lost.
Oh, same.
I met one of the actors from Lost. It was the woman who played. She was in season 4, Charlotte, and she was at a con, like a small Comic-Con type thing, and I was like, oh, cool, there's someone from Lost here. And I was with my friend, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say, and I walk up there, and just like, all I could blurt out was, I love Lost. And she goes, thank you. And it was the most awkward encounter ever. Okay, that was technically our first podcast, since everything else was video, and we had so many issues with that.
We actually have to save the audio files.
We do have to save the audio files. I can't tell you how many times and how many different ways I tried to preserve that video, and it was gone forever.
That's good. Did we learn like how and why?
No, I did not learn how or why,
We didn't
but I
learn
did
anything
learn.
from this failure.
I did learn a valuable lesson of not to brag about my video and audio quality during the entire podcast or video. Anyway,
Well, you do have the coolest microphone for audio.
okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I don't want to jinx this one too.